Hi YouTube, this is going to be my take on a Vampire Beast build for Age of Wonders 4, the Thrones of Blood expansion. The Thrones of Blood gave us the Elder Vampire Rulers that have a unique synergy with beasts in that you can actually start recruiting them in your capital as soon as you get access to thralls. The three you can recruit are the Vampire Spider Hatchling, which is an evolve unit. If it sticks around, it turns into a tier 3, but it has lifesteal on its attacks. The Shrieking Bat, which is a ranged unit that also counts as an undead, and the Vampire Spider Matriarch that is going to be the real backbone of our army. And the reason for that is they have the ability to spawn a tier 1 spider, which means for each Vampire Spider Matriarch you're bringing in, you're actually bringing in like 2 animals onto the battlefield, in addition to just being sort of a souped up version of the tier 1 with, lifesteal on its attacks and all that good stuff. In addition, all of the beasts have low maintenance, so it does make it a little easier to maintain. All right, so I'm going to go through the society we chose, the different traits, then the tomes and how they sort of go in order to get the exact affinities we need, because the affinities are pretty tight in this build. And then finally, I'll talk about the different heroes you're going to want to recruit, and then the builds for both rulers and heroes that I chose, and just items that you should be looking to build sort of right away in your item forge to help you clear the game. All right, so let's tab over here. So obviously we're starting with an Elder Vampire. You can choose either the Pureblood or the Hybrid. It's just a cosmetic thing where the Hybrid lets you sort of pick whatever race you want as your ruler, um, versus the Pureblood have their own sort of look. For your ruler, I think Ranger's the best, but I can also see Warlock working. I'll talk more about it in the hero section. And then our first tome, obviously, is Tome of Beasts, but we'll get to the tomes. Um, for the look of the race, I like when you're doing any sort of like animal beast build to have sort of one of the furry races, especially the ones that can get fangs, so like the simians or the lupines. I just think they look really good with all like the vampire stuff. And then let's go into the traits. So notably the form traits here, before I start talking about them, is they're only going to apply to your ruler, your heroes, and a very few amount of units that you'll be using. So at the start of the game, let me pull it up here, like your tier 1 units, right? So like your immortals and your scouts are going to be affected by your traits. But later in the game, uh, like this is the other than the immortals I still have hanging around. These are like all beasts. None of these are affected by the form traits at all, stuff like that. So you're gonna want to keep that in mind when selecting the form traits. So that's why I went with these. First is Careless. This is just because we need an extra point here, and the heroes are going to be ranged heroes because our front line is mostly going to be focused on like spiders and other beasts. So we're not really going to be having our heroes be in, end their turn in defense mode. We're not building any sort of like defensive master, death knight, or warriors. So I think this is just sort of a free point to take. And we're doing that in order to get cold-blooded. Now you could skip these two, but I think cold-blooded is very important because aside from the tier 1 unit, the immortal, which is our little shock trooper here, when your units die, they're going to affect your morale because a unit died in combat. And we are going to be wanting to have units die, as you'll see as like the spoilers, we're cold to death. So being able to sort of offset some of the morale loss for that is really helpful. In addition, a lot of the morale builds from the previous expansion with the updated undead stuff are still super strong, and this can sort of help combat any sort of morale bombing that's taking place against you. Next is Quick Reflexes. Quick Reflexes really helps with the early game because the AI is, when you're fighting against it to sort of clear the nodes, is programmed to run up to you until they have a certain percentage chance to hit, and Quick Reflexes means that they usually have to run up an extra square. So either it gives them enough room for your melee to attack them, or it denies them attack because they have to move closer. So overall, it's just a really good trait. And when it stops being useful for any of our like frontline units, it actually is really helpful for the heroes because they're in the back, so they're really only taking ranged abilities. So it's just sort of like a second windshield that they can get. And finally, for third, I went for Shrieking Bat mounts for this run. I actually think, unless you're like really want to do the whole like vampire bat synergies, which I thought looked really cool, I think the better choice is actually to take athletics, because the Shrieking Bats are, if I pull it up here, they're only going to affect your heroes, the wild speakers, which, you know, they sort of fall off, and I don't even have any left. The blood cultists, and personally, I don't think the blood cultists are very good. They do have the ability to inflict blood parasite, which is super strong because blood parasite essentially counts as bleeding. But when that unit that's bleeding dies, you summon a blood maggot, which is notably an animal. And when the blood maggot dies, it has a chance to blood parasite things around it. So initially, I was trying to do some sort of like blood parasite build, and there are ways to get it in the build, mostly through heroes and other stuff. But I found that the battle mages just weren't strong enough. We're really trying to buff like the beasts, and a lot of them are fighters. So most of our buffs are going to be melee, and as a result, the battle mages just tend to really fall off. In addition, they're just super squishy and um, not very good. So I wouldn't really recommend building too many of them. I think you're better off just running around with stacks of immortals and a hero, and then that way, even if the immortals die in combat, your hero gets the XP, and then they resurge after combat, and then you can move them again next turn. And then if you're running around with a stack of low life immortals, when they die in combat, you're going to get stacks of Cult of Death procs on your hero, which makes it stronger. So I think this is the way to go. And immortals can't turn into cavalry, so I do think it's better to go athletics, just in order to have the immortals go from 32 to 40 movement speed. Although notably on this map, because there were so many like mountains and stuff, this is just like a randomly generated map, the bats did end up being pretty helpful. So if you know sort of what map you're going into and you think like the flying movement could be helpful, there is an argument towards taking the bat there. In addition, if you start as a ranger and you start the crowbow doesn't normally start you with a mount, but when you take a specific mount trait, it actually starts your ruler automatically with a mount. So you'd be able to start with the crowbow and a shrieking bat mount, which is really strong. So I think that one's sort of up to you. I'd lean towards athletics unless I know I'm going into a map where I'm going to need the flying. All right, so as I said before, we're going dark, and we're going Cult of Death. Cult of Death gives you power from death, which, you pull it up here, it's 5 health per stack. I think I have it. As with all the yeah, here we go, Mark of the Death Cult. Power Death. So you get 1 Mortal Blessing whenever a unit dies, which gives you 2% crit and 5% health, stacking up to 10 times. So that's up to 20% crit and 50 health, which is kind of ridiculous. And then if that unit is the one that kills it, you get another stack. So that's how Mark of Death works. So we are going to want a lot of units to be dying in order to sort of stack that up. And it also counts where enemies are dead too. So you don't have to be just killing your units. You can also, kill the enemies, as is usually the case. So we're going Dark Cult of Death, right? And so we have the Dark Affinity and the Nature Affinity, and then we're going to have 2 from the tomes. So in order to do these tomes in the way I have set out, you are going to need a Dark Affinity from your society traits, and you're going to need a Nature Affinity. So for Dark Affinity, there's 2 options, in my opinion. Scions of Evil is really good on vampires because, let me see if I even have anything in the crypt. When you unlock your prison and your crypt, yeah, here we go, I have stuff in the prison. So you can actually devour, which is an evil act. It says 0 because I'm already a capped evil, but it'll give you -5. It'll give you 5 towards evil, but you can devour them, and then you'll see like the units here. So if I select this, then they have XP, right? And let's see, I devour something else. Oh, it's not working because the game's over, right? But essentially makes it really easy for you to get max evil alignment, which enables you to get the less gold and essentially 20% more gold in draft towards pumping out spiders and other units. But more importantly, you start off with a bunch of draft, which is always nice, and you actually get a lot more Imperium throughout the course of the game. And because we're dipping into so many affinities, there's actually a lot of stuff you're going to want from different affinity trees. So I think the extra Imperium really does help throughout the course of the game. So I think Silence of Evil is really strong. The other one that I could see going towards is Cult of Personality. I've heard in some multiplayer servers people have this banned just because starting with a +1 hero cap is kind of outrageously powerful. And then additionally getting a bonus like 2, 3, 4, even 4 skill points on your heroes is kind of ridiculous as far as what they can do, because heroes are always going to be like the strongest unit in an army. Um, so you could also try playing with that as well. So those are the two for the dark. I went with Scion. And then for I think there's two good options, I'd say, for the nature one. Visions of Destiny and then choosing nature is a sort of late game pick. It requires you, let's see, does this have the quest? No. So it requires you to have 8 nature affinity and I think like 50, yeah, 50 provinces like taken over, like the little these things between all your cities. And then what it does is it gives you the Mark of Nature. Let me see if I find, here it is. Uh, so it gives your units the Mark of Nature, and so whenever a friendly unit dies, which is what we're looking for, right, with the Cult of Death, it gains Grace, Grace is obviously super strong. Whenever you get hit, um, you get temporary hit points. It can stack, it counters Torment. In addition, you also get Strengthened. So you get Grace and Strengthened. So Strengthened when an enemy unit dies, and then Grace when your friendly units die. So really strong late game, can make your sort of death stacks late game super hard to kill, especially when you've ramped up all of your Mark of Death stacks, and then you have Mark of Nature keeping you by. So Mark of Death giving you 50 more health, and then getting Grace every time something dies. It's kind of, it sort of like loops in on self. However, the one downside to that is it's not going to do anything early game, and um, we do have good access to food as a vampire ruler, because food converts into thralls as well. So building food as a vampire is more worthwhile than it is in other societies. But even so, it's going to be like late mid game when you unlock it. So you're essentially going to be down a whole trait when you're clearing the map early game. And if you don't want to play like that, you are going to have a much weaker late game board. However, you can just go with the tried and true Fabled Hunters. Additional regen on the map, although notably the can't regen in Sunlight of Vampires does override like bonus regen like this. It's so in like Sunless Terrain and Underground you get the extra 5, in the Sunlight you won't. And obviously it just gives you, extra stuff whenever you clear stuff, which is what you're going to do, which is why it's like the strongest trait in the game. But so I went with these two. You only need the one nature affinity, so you don't need visions. You can just go with Fabled Hunters, but I went with visions just because it made late game sort of like really easy. Alright, so now let me go through the tomes. So as I said, start tome with beasts. Animal, beast build, you gotta start tome beasts. You're gonna want to get Call Wild Animal. Marcus Prey is actually super good here. Let me pull it up here. So Marcus Prey is only 5 mana and 10 combat casting points, and then it makes an enemy distracted, so everything hitting its flanking, and they get 3 Sunder defense until the end of the turn. And because it's only 5 mana, early game, you can actually just toggle this on. Make sure you toggle Death Waltz off. The AI does not know how to use this if you're auto-resolving. Very strong skill. Essentially, like, gives your unit an extra turn and then kills it, which both triggers things and gives you more turns. Plus, it gives it resurgence, so you can use it on units that maybe die anyways, and then you get them back after combat. Really strong. The AI just doesn't know how to use this. So leave on Marcus Prey, and then if you want to throw a little mana into a fight to sort of make sure you win, definitely helps. 3 Sunder defense plus flanking is really strong, especially because all of your beasts will have flanking, because the very first hero upgrade on most of your stuff is going to be Pack Leader, which gives all animals flanking. So, very strong spell to have early. Call Wild Animal, just your generic summon spell. Notably, if you do Called Wild Animal on any sort of the sunless terrain, you have a chance to summon the Vampire Spider Hatchlings, which are great because if you can leave them around long enough, they evolve into Matriarchs that are super strong. Or you can get like Blood Maggots, which are not as good when you're sort of have them in your stack, because in order for them to really do damage, they have to die, and then if they die without Resurgence, it doesn't really work there, but you can get them if there's nothing else, right? And then if you use it on ice terrain, you can get ice spiders that are really strong, or polar bears. So how it works is it's 60 mana, but if you find it, you can choose tier 1 or tier 2 units. If it's a tier 2, you have to pay an additional 40 mana when you cast it. So that's something to keep in mind when you're using it. Wild Speakers, they're okay. Maybe one in a stack. They're a lot better early because they come with their own hound. The hound inflicts bleeding, but they do fall off when you want to get more, because you're not getting any buffs on them, right? You're just getting buffs on the animals, and you're better off just running like a tier 2 hound or like a tier 3 animal or something you find, than a wild speaker once you have a couple buffs going. Animal kinship is great. It's a racial transformation, like a minor one, that makes it so that both your units and your beasts get additional crit chance. Where is it? Minor race transformation. This is not here. They get additional crit chance when they're next to each other. Let me just pull it up here. Yeah. When next to a friendly animal, both units. That's the important part. Both units. So you can fly your ruler or whatever up to, like behind a big stack of like a semicircle of your units, and then they all get 10% damage and 10% crit chance. And notably, 10% damage is really good because, especially in the early game, the way rounding works is favorably towards you in this game. So if 10% damage would actually bump you up by like 1 or 1.5, it'll give you like 2 there. So it's quite strong. So basically, we want everything from Tome Beasts. Next, we're going for Tome of the Bloodright. Actually, I think it would be easier to just show it in game. So show Tome Library. My tomes. As you see, I have little extra ones here, just because it went a little late. So Tome of the Bloodrights, the next one. Use a Blood Altar, which is okay. It's a conduit that makes draft. The big thing here we want is Blood Drinking Blades. So Blood Drinking Blades gives you +1 damage on attacks, which is great. We always love more damage. And then if you strike a target with bleeding, you heal a little. So very minor enchantment, but it's a tier 1 tome, and it's essentially the same as all the other tier 1 tomes where it's like +2 elemental, -1 physical, except instead it's just like +1 physical all around, right? So that's good. And then additionally, we get Flesh Carved Runes. Again, it's a race transformation, so it's really just going to be for your heroes and some of your early game units, but it is really good on your heroes because it gives you additional region on the world map that, again, only works if you're in Sunless or Underground, because your heroes are going to be vampires as well, in addition to your ruler. But it lets your attack and debuff abilities ignore a bunch of stat resistance per stacks of bleeding. And later on, there's going to be ways to inflict bleeding, but most notably, like the Vampire Spider Matriarchs, just inflict bleeding naturally with their attacks. Rite of Life Leeching is probably the third thing I'd research here, right? Because the cultists are okay. Bloodletting's okay. It's guaranteed bleeding, but you have to be positioned in a really weird way. You can't just like target a stack. You have to have your unit in the enemy stack and then use it. So and then Sanguine Focus is a buff for like battle mage supports, which we're not really doing. You can get it eventually, but it's but Rite of Life Leeching is really good because it's a chaos buff spell, which is important for later. Because we'll be taking the Chaos Altar Amplifier Lens for the buff portion, because that gives you 3 strengthened on every Chaos buff. So this would give you 4 strengthened and lifesteal. So this is good, especially early. It just a friendly unit takes 5 damage, whatever, and then all the adjacent friendly units get strengthened stacks and lifesteal. So lifesteal can be quite strong, especially early game. Although later on you're your spiders are already gonna have lifesteal, so it does sort of fall off there. But we'll have other chaos buff spells later, anyways. So that's the second tome. The third tome is going to be another chaos tome, the Tome of Revelry. So at this point, you will have three chaos affinity, and then 3 dark affinity. So keep that in mind. And what we want from this tome, Blood Fury weapons, great, just another +2 damage on base attacks, increased for single shot, really strong. And then if the unit kills something, adjacent enemies automatically get 2 stacks of bleeding, great, so inflicting bleeding, perfect. Revels of Blood, it's good to have one like really good siege project. This is pretty good. All attacking units gain morale, so it's just a nice little buff to crit chance, and we are going to be sort of stacking crit chance, so it's nice to have that morale buff. And then all defending units automatically get 2 stacks of bleed for 3 turns, so great, another way to put bleeding on. And it only costs 50 mana, so great thing to slap down on any siege where you might be doing combat. Revels of Carnage, super strong spell. Notably, it doesn't say non-hero units, so this is 30% more experience for your hero units when you use it on a stack. Actually, experience also rounds favorably when we're talking about this, as long as you're in like a 6 stack or below. Once you get above 6 units in combat, sort of experience like rounds weirdly. But basically, this is gonna, if you use it on a 6 stack and then just go to combat with the 6 stack, you're gonna get 30 or maybe a little more experience for that. Really good. Because all of our heroes are vampires, we want as many skill points as we can get on them. And early on, you also have the little vampire spider hatchlings that you can summon with the summon beast, or if you finally hit thralls, you can start pumping some of those out of your capital city. And if you can keep them alive and pump experience into them, they can evolve into matriarchs that are super strong. And finally, Reveler's Heart. Again, not really that big of a deal. You can get it eventually, because it's only really going to affect your heroes, but 50% more morale for your heroes. Great for, crit chance, great for not routing, etc. So it's just a nice thing to have. But I'd say these 3 are the big ones you want from this tome. And then our next tier 2 tome is going to be Tome of the Beacon. So now we're going to have 2 order affinity, which is nice because the only really good order things are either at the start or the very end. So we can get some of the things at the start. The only thing we really want here is Mighty Meek. Mighty Meek affects both Tier 1 and Tier 2 units, which is great because a lot of the Tier 2 beasts that you can get for the bonus 40 mana are quite strong, and it also affects your Wild Speakers, so it's nice to have that. And then any sort of Tier 1 or 2 units you summon, like your Vampire Matriarch summoning Tier 1, they'll be affected by Mighty Meek, so it gives them Faithful, which is nice. Most of the beasts are going to have low maintenance upkeep anyways, but Faithful stacks on top of that, so you're not going to be having to pay off your armies. Strategists, always nice, and then 1 spirit per the unit tier of the target being attacked. So if you're and heroes always count as 5. So if you're attacking a hero, this is 5 flat spirit damage against them. And if you're attacking an undead hero, they're actually weak to that, so it'd be 5 plus the weakness and stuff. So really, honestly, this enchantment is the reason people get this tome, and it's totally worth getting for. The other thing I'd say is you're playing with pre-cities and people just aren't killing them. This is just a nice spell to get. It essentially just makes that your vassal gives you 15 mana a turn, so it pays for itself in 4 turns, and then you just essentially have 15 mana per turn going on. You can cast it on as many vassals as you have. So that's nice to have. We're not going to be using Summon Blessed Soul. Summon Beast is going to be better. Conjure Divine Beacons, really good, is like a summon, big AoE heal, and then it like ticks every turn. However, our next tome, we're going to have essentially a much stronger spell, so it's up to you if you want to research this or not. Champlain's good. They got nerfed. They're fine. If you want, you can research them. But personally, I just go back and research anything you missed, or some of the like standard stuff, like Cult of the Death, like Mark of the Death Cult, and like just the generic things. For our first tier 3 tome, obviously, animal build, Tome of Vigor. Tome of Vigor, Empower Beasts. This is, why you play Beasts, right? So, Every animal gets 20% damage, 10% hit points, decreased number of units in the formation, which means they deal more damage when they are um, weakened. So the amount of units you have in a formation affects how much damage they deal, and by reducing the amount of number of them when they take damage, they are going to lose less units from their formation, which means they're going to do more damage overall. Um, so yeah, this is, I mean, this is the big payoff for playing animals. We also get Called Greater Base, which if you have the spare mana, you can start using over the Carl, just normal beast. It has the same thing, Rider, where you have to pay bonus mana to summon a tier 4 animal. Bunch of really good tier 4 animals. White Wolf is super good. Um, that's personally my favorite, but there's some other ones. There's like, if you're in like a swamp, you can get the like Undead Crocodile that counts as an animal and an undead for some later stuff. Um, so pretty good, pretty good. And finally, Totem of the Wild. Totem of the Wild is essentially the best spell for this build. What you want to do is you just want to once you get Totem of the Wild and you have enough mana, because it's like 150 mana, or it says 80 here. I don't know. It said 150 in game. What you want to do is you want to just turn off all the other spells in your spell book and make sure it's only casting Totem of the Wild, and just spam Totem of the Wilds. So it summons a totem every turn. It spawns a beast, and it works for 3 turns. So turn 1, Totem of the Wild. Turn 2, Totem of the Wild. Turn 3, Totem of the Wild. And they're just going to keep ramping out beasts and beasts and beasts and beasts. So this tome is the power spike, right? Because when you hit the tier 3 tome, you should also be able to start recruiting vampire spider matriarchs from your capital if you've got it all the way to tier 3 and have a healthy dose of food making you thralls. So yeah, those are the big 3. And then super growth is a minor race transformation. Again, this is really only going to affect your heroes at this point. Maybe you have a couple support units or immortals left over, but it just gives you 10% hit points, an additional retaliation effect, reduced number of units. The reduced units doesn't affect heroes, obviously, because it's only 1 unit, but little extra hit points, little free attack. It is a lot of casting points, 350, but it's something nice. Unleash Beast, I wouldn't really bother with this because it gives them Berserk, so don't really. Yeah, I'd really just spam Totem Wild. If you have spare mana, use like Mark of Prey. Don't use Unleash the Beast. So tier 3, we're gonna Tome Cycles, and there's 2 big things for this. The first one is Blaze of Decay. Blaze of Decay is super important because you'll see it affects fighters, which is going to be our animals, our spiders, and all that. And it inflicts decaying, and for a single shot you get 2 stacks. So unfortunately they did nerf decaying a while back, so now you have to sort of stack it up, and it counters regeneration. But it's a good way to sort of counter healing, especially if you're running into like gray stacking builds or something. Really important to sort of like get ahead of the healing. And it's really just sort of like a counter to a lot of things. In addition, it does like a little damage over time. So that's the main reason we're here, is to get Blaze of Decay. At the end of these, I'll talk about a little, different way you could do like the tier 3 and beyond, but I think this is the best way to do it. And then you also get Druid of the Cycle. Now, Druid of the Cycle it's a plant, which is good for like later stuff, but it's not a form unit, so it doesn't get any of your form traits, so it is going to be stuck at 32 movement speed. But it's really powerful in a Cold to Death build, because you can bring back dead units, you can sacrifice units. This is for like killing enemy units, but this one you can just non-hero friendly unit is killed, right? So if you've got like a 10% health immortal at the start of the game, you could just kill it after you like use a heal or something, or restart the cycle or whatever, and you're going to trigger all of your on death effects, and you're gonna reset all of this, and if you want, you can just bring it back. And if you have 2 Druid cycles in an army, you can just sort of like loot them back, like have one kill it, have the other res, vice versa, and just go back and forth and build up your stacks in the corner if you wanted to. That's not how I like to play, but I mean, if you wanted to, you could just sit there and do that. But very strong support unit. And then finally, Cycle of Seasons. They made it so that you can use these on enemy cities now that you're like sieging. So as long as they don't have a Spelljammer up, you can throw this on the city. So it's just a nice little, it doesn't do a lot, just like minor damage, a little buff, little healing. Um, but it's essentially a free sort of out of combat thing you can do, which is nice. Um, Parting Gifts is really good if you can get your hands on haste berries and get the overcharged wand, because then that means if you overcharge your combat enchantment, it lets you cast a second spell that turn. That's the only case where you'd want to use a combat enchantment over like Totem of the Wild, but Parting Gifts is also sort of like good for this build because whenever a friendly unit dies, even if you like kill it yourself with Druid of the Cycle, it's going to heal everything around it. Um, so if you can, make a wand or find a wand with that, it's really good. And then for the tier 4 tome, as with the earlier tomes and the culture and the Dark Society trait, we actually have 3 chaos from Bloodright and Revelry, and then from Bloodright, Dark Culture, and our Dark trait, we have 3 of that. So that actually lets us get, for tier 4, Tome of the Crimson Rain. Despite being a nature build, we actually aren't taking any tier 4 nature tomes, which I think is really cool. And so this will bump us to 4 chaos and 4 dark. Now everything here is pretty good. Blood Exarch, super strong, mostly because of the blood pull. Being able to pull a unit out of the formation, especially like a hero unit or something, insanely strong, could just win you the battle on the spot. Even if it's not a hero, it's like a support unit or something, it's like really bugging you, you can just like drag it in and then sort of, attack it with all your spiders. Really strong. It can, give a bunch of crit chance and crit damage to something else. Can't affect heroes, but tier 3 or higher, which means, you guessed it, the Vampire Spider Matriarch, you can give Blood of the Exarch, very strong. Its basic attack is a cleave that inflicts Blood Parasite, which is what we were trying to do before, but I think the battle mages aren't really strong enough for it, but this unit's definitely strong enough for it. And then, yeah, this Siphon Lesser is just sort of like a little range move if you need to use it. It could potentially reset Blood of the Exarch, but you're much better just running around, pulling a priority unit, and then trying to cleave everything with Blood Parasite. Because once Blood Parasite starts going off, and you get your first maggot, and then it explodes, and you get everything else with Blood Parasite, all of your maggots are going to have all of your animal buffs. You're going to have Mighty the Meek. It's really strong. So I definitely say you want at least one Blood Exarch in your like triple stack. It takes a lot to summon, but it's really strong. Mantle the Blood Noel is okay. It does affect all of our tier 3 units, our Vampire Spiders, but it just gives them little bolstered defenses and resists when they're hit, and then 5 hit points and 5 healing in combat for each tier 1 and 2, but it only counts at the start of combat, so generally this isn't going to trigger unless you have a couple like Immortals or Wild Speakers left over. Mostly just here for Coagulate. It's okay, it's just nice to have. Gift of the Old Blood, this is for your heroes mostly, and then if you have any leftover Wild Speakers or Immortals running around, it's really helpful for them too, because gives you Undead, which is great for our next tome. Life Drinker, which isn't lifesteal, so it stacks with lifesteal. So whenever a unit near you dies, you get strengthened and healed, which is great because we want things to be dying. And then your base attacks have a 60% chance of inflicting Blood Parasite, increased for single shot, which isn't a lot, but notably, with our racial from this, we're actually going to ignore a ton of status resist on bleeding targets. So you actually have a pretty high chance of inflicting Blood Parasite. But notably, it is only base attacks, which is a little tough for heroes because you generally don't want to be using base attacks on heroes, but you never know. It does come up, and it's just a nice thing to have. Tears of the Crimson Sovereign. This is essentially what I'd use over Rite of Life Leeching, because you're already going to have Lifesteal on your spiders. So what do? We use this instead as a damage debuff spell. because it's going to buff your units to, it's random, right? But it gets three 90% blood parasite, which you might land one, because this is a spell. It doesn't get through their resistances like our units do. A little damage, and then you get a little healing, and then fortune, which is great because we want some more crit chance on our units. It's good to cast sort of like at the start. So if you want to do like a setup turn, you can do like like overcharge parting gifts into Tears of the Crimson Sovereign, and then start spitting out totems. Pretty good. Crimson Court, pretty good. You can only build it in your capital city, but your tier 3, look, tier 3 again, and 4 and 5 get hit points and 2 experience around. So this can cause them to rank up pretty quickly, especially the ones you recruit fresh. They'll be starting to rank up, and ranks are pretty powerful on your units. Just giving them more stats, sometimes more abilities. More regeneration is always nice. And this one's okay. I never really used the magistrate. It just gives you mana. So, but experience per turn and then additional regen on your tier 3s is nice. Obviously buffing the tier 3s. Yeah, and so everything in this tome is pretty good. I'd say Blood Edge Arch, blah blah blah. Blood Eggs Arch. Yeah, I mean probably like Mantle and Tears. Gift the Old Blood's nice, but it costs 600 casting points, and we don't have any Astral Affinity, so that is going to take probably like 5 turns. So it's a lot, and it's only going to affect your heroes, so you really got to want this. I'd say probably go for the Blood X Arch first, and then, take your pick. Finally, since we had 3/3 going into this, and now we have 4 Dark, and because we took Token of Beacon for Mighty Meek, we have 2 Order, which means we can actually take Tome of the Revenant as our final tier 4 tome. And notably, even though it's only sort of affecting our heroes, Gift of the Old Blood does grant our units the undead type. So the undead buffs here are going to work with them. So you get access to souls, which is actually pretty nice for vampires, because once you get access to souls, you can get access to, where is it? Here we go. A spell that converts souls into thralls. And thralls are important because at this stage in the game, you're going to be able to cast the Blood Moon Ritual, which is kind of insane. So then essentially it's like a world enchantment, and you don't have sunlight weakness anymore. You get an additional 15 points of regen on the map, 20% damage, and 2 resistance for 10 turns. So it's all your vampires. So it's basically just going to be your rulers, and then maybe a couple supported units you have left over. But it's just such an insane buff to your heroes. It's definitely worth sort of making sure you have the thralls to pump it out. I never really used Desecration Ritual. That's sort of like an emergency, like fighting in sunlight. I need to like turn this sunless. And then if you ever run out of thralls to, summon matriarchs, you can use your souls to make one. So having access to souls is just a nice little perk. And that's just for selecting the tome. You got that. And then Necropolis, it's a research post that gives you soul income, so it's nice to build. Both because if you have any sort of research post buffs, Scholars Guild, all that, it can give you research as well, which is always nice. And then the Titans we're not really going to use. I mean, you can if you want. It's good to recruit in your non-capital cities if you just want some. But they're just okay. We don't really build for them, and they're mythic, so they don't really inherit much of the enchants. Unholy Champion's a big one. So the reason this is broken is for our debuff matrix, you're going to want to take the order one. Let me see if I can pull it up here. It'd be in the city, right? Yeah. So structures. Yeah, so Chaos Bolstering Matrix. So Chaos buff spells grant 3 strengthen. And then Order Amplifying Lens. So Order debuff spells, remove all positive status effects. This is insane. It's not just like one stack. It just strips everything they have. So that's why this tome is essentially so ridiculously powerful. Because Unholy Champion, it buffs a unit, sure, but in addition to that, enemy units in a 2 radius hex of it lose 2 morale, okay, whatever, and then they're stripped of all of their buffs. So this spell's pretty crazy if you can get a good spot for it. It does cost souls, which is why you probably want an Acropolis or two, but anytime units are dying, you're going to get souls anyways, and we don't really have that many ways to spend them, unlike a traditional Necromancy build, so it is a good thing to have. Revenant Whispers, another great out-of-combat thing we can do. Again, cost souls, so this is essentially the main ways we're spending souls here. Conjure 3 skeletons on your side, and then the enemy unit gets 2 demoralized. Demoralized is whatever, we're not really stacking morale, so it's just like a nice little buff, but 3 free skeletons, and then they have Unholy Champion, so they have Undying, which means we can essentially kill the skeletons for fodder, and then 2 turns later, they'll get back up. So it's great to just have, more units for free, essentially, going into a battle, if you have all your mana and spells and stuff prepped. Chamber of the Right, essentially because our units are undead, any racial units you draft are going to have natural regeneration. It's not that big of a deal because we're not really running racial units anymore, so you don't have to borrow with that. Fallen Angel is great, but we're not really running any sort of morale build. And if you're summoning a mythic unit, you definitely want to be summoning Blood Axe Arches. Yeah, and then Undead Resentment applies to any of your racial units and your heroes. Vicious Killer, it's nice. Spirit and Fire Resistance are very common damage types, so essentially it just makes your heroes a little more tanky. And at this point, 150 isn't that long. It's probably like a turn or two. 140, excuse me. So that's an okay buff, but Unholy Champion's the big one. Revenant Whispers, access to souls, the Necropolis, and then I take Resentment. I think this would be your 3, and then go pick others. Chance rate's okay. It's fine. And then finally, for our final tier, we'll pick Nature Goddess, because we'll have either 8 or 9, depending on if you went for Vision of Destiny, or if you just went for Fabled Hunters. Either way, you'll have enough for the Goddess Tome. And the Goddess Tome gives us Force of Nature, which gives buffs to plant, animals, and cavalry. So, if you have any sort of cavalry, if you ended up taking the bat thing, you get a minor buff here, but I don't think it's worth building around, because we don't have many of these left, and this is like a random tier 1 range unit that spawned from a chaos thing. So the big buff here is the animals. So 15% more crit chance, and then additional +3 blight on attacks. Very strong. In addition to the mass rejuvenation, which brings back all animals and plants. Normally, you'd want to do this with the tier 4 nature tome that turns your racial units into plants, but as we're not really running any racial units, it doesn't really matter, and we can afford to take 2 super strong hybrid tier 4 tomes. It's going to bring back all our animals anyways. The plants we're running would just be the Druid of the Cycles, so that's nice if any of them fall over. But even regardless of that, it's going to heal all our units 40 fate points. So finally, we have a spell that's better than Totem of the Wild. It's obviously going to depend on the game state. You don't want to do this if none of your units are dead, but because you can continuously loop this, and because we have a bunch of dark stuff, we can actually get. Let me pull up the. We can actually easily get Death Magic here, because we have so much Dark Affinity, especially early on. Once you get Death Magic, you essentially have infinite combat casting points, and with all of the mana increases from the nature tree, you're going to have plenty of mana. So you can just sort of keep looping your units over and over. And that's the end game plan. So I guess the last things to go through would be sort of the heroes. So let me do that. So for a ruler, um, you're gonna want to, I think Ranger, but I also have an option here for the Warlock. Ranger is good because it gives you access to um, sort of the reset mechanic of kill shot, and the Elder Vampire Ruler has one of the best buffs in the game, right at level 4, which is Hemomancer, and essentially it just deals 10% of damage to yourself, but your next attack deals plus 50% damage. But you heal when killing units anyways, but it's just such an absurd amount of damage, and then you can reset the cooldown of it. So you just go through like Snapshot. You can also take Scattershot if you like it. Snapshot's just like a zero um, action thing to get sort of resets off, so it's nice to like reset the cooldown on it. So you just go down, right? You go this way or this way. Big Game Hunter is just bonus damage per tier target, increase with single shot, great. I personally like the bleeding because we have a bunch of other ways to get strengthened, and you have so much healing anyways from like Hemomancer and then other stuff later down the line. I don't think you need the regeneration as much, um, but maybe it's better if you're playing against like a dot build or something. But just giving access to bleeding, because it says physical range attacks, not just base attacks. So this is going to apply to like all your ranged attacks, which is nice. Um, and bleeding helps us to like ignore status resistance on some of our abilities for other stuff. And then kill shot, killing a unit resets all ability cooldowns. So it only triggers once per turn, but it can trigger once each turn. So that's why sort of we're taking like snapshot. Where's the? I think there was something. Yeah, this is like leave one. This is like a big damage thing. Damage buff here. Damage buff here. Right. So you're gonna come down here and get this. And then you're gonna come down here. Obviously crit. When you crit, your crits deal more damage. Fortune for more crit. When you crit, you get strengthened and you heal. Just a worthless node, travel node, and then go for the kill. Attacks deal 50% damage until the next turn. So you can take that, you can activate this, you can activate this. Then your attacks are dealing double damage, and then you know use your free shot, use your leave one, like use your one, or just attack for one. And then if you kill a unit, it resets your go for the kill, resets this, resets this. So pretty strong. And then once you have this, you can actually even yeah. And then once you have this, you can come in here. You get Siphon Blood. You can even get Siphon Blood before. Before going down this line, you can come get Siphon Blood, and you can come get Drain Familiar. Drain Familiar is great. It's essentially another reason to run Cult of Death. It's a free action. It deals 20 irresistible damage to a friendly unit, and if it kills it, so be it. And then it heals you for 20, and you get 2 strengthened. This also resets. This is a cooldown too. It also resets on kill with kill shot, so you can easily get your strengthened stacks up to like ridiculous numbers. Um, and then Sanguine Extraction is nice. If they're bleeding from like either prior shots like this, then your Siphon Blood is going to ignore half of their defensive resistance, which is nice. Um, you can take like Slipway and Flying, but you can just get this through items and like a mount, so I wouldn't bother with this. You could take the bonus range on Siphon Blood, but Snapshot's already 4 range, so you're probably going to want to be in range of that anyways. It's up to you. But Siphon Blood is 3, so it could be worth it to take it, right? There's plenty of free skill points here. Basically, you come down here, you get this, you get this, you get this. You can take like the range thing here. And then over here, obviously, Blood Empowerment. You can take this whenever you want. It's just +2 fire damage, just nice to have. But I think you want to try and get the combo up early, but it's up to you whether you want to get the early fire damage or not. Marrow Drinker, just make your attacks inflict bleeding, which stacks with this. So now you have addition, because this inflicts bleeding on AoE, right, around your target, and this inflicts bleeding on the target. And then when any enemy suffers damage from bleeding, you get 2 temporary hit points. So AoE bleeding, single target bleeding, it's all going to heal you. Scarlet Plague is a nice, like, really far range thing. Essentially deals 20 damage and applies 2 automatic blood parasites to them. And blood parasites, because the whole beast explosion, maggots everywhere, really quite strong. You can also pick up Unholy Leader if you wanted to, if you're running a stack with your leader with undead units. Notably, as the Ranger leader, you're not going to have access to the pack leader because we're taking Hemomancy first. So it might be worth to take Unholy Leader, and then any of your racial or um, like mythic units you put in the stack with your leader, and then they'll benefit from Unholy Leader. And we get Blood Blight. Blood Blight is a sort of similar to Scarlet Plague, except it is a leave one, and it's also AOE. So you know, 4 range, 1 unit, and 2 others take some damage and get 3 blood parasites. And then you kill them, you reset your cooldowns, you reset this, and then for 16, if you get to 16, well, if it's your ruler, you're always going to get to 16. Blood Blight now spreads to 4 enemy units within 3 hexes, so just bigger range on it, and you get to conjure a Vampire Spider Matriarch at the start, not necessarily at the start of battle, but conjure Vampire Spider Matriarch, and then the beauty of this is you can actually reset the cooldown with Kill Shot and then keep summoning them, unless they've patched the once per battle stuff. But last I played, they didn't, so we'll see. And then finally, Ancient One, just 20% damage, 20 hit points. Just nice little grab once you're like 16. Grab these 2. So that's the Ranger ruler. Obviously, you have more points, so you can get the range here. You get like the stun here, but you mostly probably just want to get more damage. So just like come down here for like damage, right? So let me talk about the Warlock. So the Warlock's another option you have for a ruler. So for the Warlock, it's more of a like battlefield, lots of minions. Minions are going to be super strong, and when they die, stuff happens. So it's another strong build. It doesn't really come online until level 4, once you get zombies. I think it's, let me pull it up here. I think it's still 2 zombies. I don't know why it says 1 on the site. Yeah, it's 2 zombies. So I can just go through here, because this is level 20. So one of the thing about Elder Vampires is they're going to drain experience from your turned heroes. So your ruler is always going to hit at least level 16, right? But your other heroes are going to take a little longer to get going. So a lot of the other builds, you're going to want to do stuff that comes online like super early. So for the you want to come get the zombies. Bone Wyvern Keeper is interesting, right? Because it counts as a where is it? Like an animal and an undead and a dragon, but 2 zombies. With the way we're buffing all of the stuff, essentially we're just using the zombies as like fodder to, go in, basically just die, right? And then proc a bunch of nonsense. So I think 2 bodies is just better than 1, despite the Bone Wyvern being like far and away stronger. Raise Undead, nice. Just you can resurrect an undead. Notably, it lets you resurrect like racial or hero units later in the game once they become undead. But otherwise, you just make zombies, which is fine. And then you get Decaying Dissolution, which is part 1. So whenever a summoned unit, so summoned units, summoned like by this hero, adjacent enemy units get 15 damage and then 2 stacks of Decaying, which obviously does more damage. Claim Soul at the bottom here is just a single target nuke. And if it kills a unit, it will reset all your cooldowns. Where does it say that? On target killed. Yeah, heals caster for 20. Target non-hero unit is revived as a Whiteborn. So if you kill a unit, not only do you heal and reset your ability cooldowns, but you also resurrect them on your side of the battlefield, which is crazy. And then this is essentially like a minor version of the Mark of Grace, which is like the big, end game Destiny finish. You just get it for free. This basically makes your ruler immortal, although they can die, but it's very hard when you have Graceful Servants, essentially, giving you so many stacks of grace. And then I'll go for the signature seals, because once you have this, you're pretty much set, right? So that's why I'm saying you could maybe have the ranger needs like more to build up, so maybe you want that as your ruler. Whereas the warlock can just come here and get this, 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 and then he's done. This is just all like nice fluff. So for the warlock, you actually want to start Night Swarm instead, because it lets you conjure a Doombat, which is a animal and a undead. So it like triggers both of the effects you have for that, and it flies. And more importantly, it lets you get pack leader, which is again why I think this is you might just want to do the ranger as the leader, because the ranger sort of like needs the buffs as the ruler, whereas the warlock can actually make do with just like the standard, initiative nature, adaptive nature, blah blah blah. This is just sort of like nice stuff to have, right? So pack leader, very important. Marrow Drinker, Scarlet Plague. I think I forgot to get Scarlet Plague here, but that's fine. Blood Blight, Blood Blight, get both of these. Oh, they are selected. I just don't know why they're. Yeah, I guess it's because they're gray. They're just sort of like, I don't know. And then over here, you can get Siphon Blood. Again, Drain Familiar. Sanguine Extraction's okay, but Siphon Blood's not really going to do that much damage, so you can go through like Stunning Drain and Charming Drain. And because you're a warlock with like the Hex Pact and Hex Seeking Bolts, you're going to ignore so much status resistance. In addition to being a racial unit, so you ignore basically all the status resistance on any bleeding target. So you can actually pretty reliably get like Draining Charms off, so I'd probably go for that. And then Drain Familiar, obviously, free way to sort of like kill your units, in addition to giving you health, strengthening you, etc. And then more range is always nice. And then for this, you want to come down here, Hex Pact for debuffs, Hex Seeking Bolts, so that you don't have to worry about accuracy anymore, and you do tons of status resist on like one target unit. And then we're going to come down this side, Siphon Blessing. It's a little short range, but it's a leave one, and you get to sort of steal all positive effects from a unit. Very strong. Sundered Res, and status resistance, and then this is the big payoff for Hex Pact. They get disrupted. So turning off enchantments basically just turns them into a base unit. So super strong. And then for the last one, I just took, +1 range, right? You just take range, and probably stop. Don't take that, and then take Draining Charm, and then this, right? And that's the Warlock build. This is level 20. And then so that's just what I have here, right? And then finally, for like normal heroes, I would not recommend being a Ritualist for your ruler. It just doesn't deal like the damage that you need a ruler to be doing early on to sort of clear things. And then if you're also like having your warlock as your like another hero, this would sort of be like what you do on the side, right? So like initiate a nature pack leader, like done. For this one, you can pick anything, any of the adepts. So Adept of Chaos is 10% crit. Adept of Shadow is +2 flanking. I think the flanking is better just because you're giving your stuff flanker, and then you +2 damage. It just rounds nicely. You could take nature too, and then if you want it to be an unholy stack instead of an animal stack, you can take unholy leader instead of pack leader. But the second one, you're basically just picking what aura you want, right, for your army. 3, you get Master of Nature, so you get Call the Wild, summon 2 tier 2 animals, very strong. And then Paragon of Nature, give everything natural regeneration, and then you get Maternal Range, natural regeneration, 30 hit points, great, right? Okay, so this is just like the standard normal hero side. And then obviously for a Ritualist, we're just going to come down here on the left side, all the way to left down here to Rite of Fury. So giving your units haste into the start of battle, especially when we're essentially a melee army with all the spiders and stuff, and all the summons are going to be mostly melee. There's like some ranged, bats and stuff that can sneak in, but it's mostly like ranged heroes and then like a melee army. So giving everything haste in order to like catch up to the opponent is very strong. It is once per battle and it's once per turn, so you just want to make sure you know when to use it. So like maybe if they're positioning or something, use it on like turn 2 or something to be able to crash into them, or if you want to like position it further up, maybe turn 1. And then you're actually going to have after you get this, you could take this if you're taking a bunch of like physical damage, but usually a lot of the damage is going to be like magic add-ons, so not a rush here. Once you come through here, I would actually go back to, you're going to have the vampire skill tree on the left side for all of your heroes, not the champion trees. So I would actually come down here, right, and take the vampiric flight, because you're going to want to have on your, let's see if I have a ritualist here. Is this the one? No. That was just one I picked up at the end. Here we go. So you're going to want to have a staff on your ritualist that you can craft. And so you're going to want to have so support abilities get bolster resistance, support abilities get strengthened. There's other stuff like you can give them regeneration, support abilities get blank, but basically you're going to want a staff for that, right? But with a staff, you can't have a mount. So what you're going to want to do, if you have enough points, which I didn't, right? So I was just like, oh, okay, I'll just take 1 point here. You're going to want to come through here and get vampiric flight. It'll be fast movement, which obviously doesn't matter if you took athletics, but it'll give you flying and 20% more evasion. So pretty strong. And slip away. So that's what you want to do. And then you can fly around with the staff. Pretty good for Ritualist. So that's the Ritualist. And then the one last thing I want to mention is the Death Knight. Death Knight can get the Bone Wyvern. You know, it's an animal. It's an undead. And I didn't really like change this from the base. It just sort of like came with most of it, right? So you just get pack leader, second wind, you know, strength and attacks. You can get crit. You can get tankiness. It depends what you need. You're not going to get a lot of experience on your non-vampire ruler hero. So basically, just come down and get knight, second wind, and then you want to come down and get your bone wyvern keeper, get your pack leader, and then you can get decaying on your attacks. You can get blight damage on your attacks, right? Because it'll inflict decaying, and then you get 10% more damage here, and you just take damage, or you can go down the crit route. I wouldn't go further on this side. Just take these 3 and done. And then I wouldn't mess. I mean, you could take like draining bite into staggering bite, but realistically, you're probably just gonna take a charge thing, right? Like a lance or something, to go with the mount. I just thought this was cool. Like you can take a flying mount or whatever, because we're not gonna want to do like a shield. Like I said in my previous videos, to get defensive masters, so you might as well just get a charge there. So you don't really need to bother with like the vampire side of the tree for the Death Knight. That's the only one I wanted to mention. It's sort of the same for like the warrior. You just do like a standard warrior build, but there's no real synergy. You just make sure you get the initiative nature, and then I think in all like any of the melee heroes you happen to get, you'd probably just go this, dang, 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 and then just like a standard build. Now for items is the last thing I want to talk about. Is here we go. So the crow bow is a unique ranger bow that you can unlock in the Pantheon. So you can start with it, but if you start with it, you don't start with a mount. So that's a little tough. But when you go into your item forge, if you click on blueprints and Pantheon, if you scroll down to the Crowmaster's bow, you can actually start building a bow with the Crowmaster perk on it. So once you have the item forge, you can actually just build it right away. If you don't want to start with it, obviously you can change the damage type, and then you can add either +1 range or inflict bleeding, right? Whatever you want to do. But getting the crowbow is the important part, because it gives you essentially just another free animal summon, and even if it doesn't deal that much damage, it works as another body on the field to die. It's another animal for all the synergies, etc. And then then some other items. The spider hatching bell, you can actually craft a, where is it? I didn't bother like equipping the last 2 heroes I got, but yeah, so you can actually craft right away for 100 essence. You just craft a tier 1 spider egg bow, really strong, and then as soon as you get access to the item forge, you can just go through it. I was actually testing some runs with the society trait where you just start off with the item forge, and it's really strong for early clearing, but it sort of like messed up the later tomes and stuff. So ended up with the traits I did. But once you get the item forge, you can just craft a spider egg wand on all your heroes. You can also craft a wand of bless because it's just a free action. You know, obviously wand of bless is much better on a ritualist because it gets all the support unit buffs. But any unit can have this. It's just a free action. You know, fortune, strength, and bolster resistance. So these two are the big items. Crow's bow, and then finally for the warlock, you're gonna want, and you can start with this one too. But again, it doesn't let you start with a mount if you pick it. The lithomancers. So let me show you the same thing. If you go into, is it blueprints, Pantheon, Litherite Orb. Now, Litherite Orb gives you units summoned by this unit gain Volatile Summon. Volatile Summon is it deals 8 physical and 8 lightning to all adjacent enemy unit when it dies. That stacks on top of the Warlock's 15 blight damage and 2 stacks of decaying when it dies. So your units are going to be popping for insane amounts of damage, right? And then obviously you can put whatever you want. You do like infecting, or you could take that off and you could do like bleeding, plus range, bleeding, right? Something like that. You know, change the type to spirit damage depending on what armies you're fighting. You know, maybe you want to do lightning or spirit or whatever. And that's the weapon for your warlock hero, right? And I think I showed off earlier the ritualist weapon. Yeah, so that's that. I think we got through everything. Heroes, items, tomes, traits. Yeah. Oh, yeah. So one last thing. Alternate tome path. If for some reason you want to go for more of like a chaos route, you can actually skip Scions of Evil and take Fabled Hunters here instead, right? Along with Division's Destiny. You are going to need the 2 nature now. And then you take Tome of Devastation here instead of Tome of Cycles. That gives you another siege project, but the important parts are Flame Burst weapons, which is more crit chance, love more crit chance, and burning. I'm not sure if this still explodes the corpses or not, because if it does, I mean, it's probably still fine because you're only resurrecting your own corpses. But essentially, tons of crit chance and burning. And then you also get access to the, where is he? Oh yeah, Monstrous Rebirth. So you can essentially transform units that are about to die into a Warbreed, and then they die. So you can like last stand something, although you're probably still just casting Tome. What is it? The totem. No, I was looking for the actual unit. There it is, Warbreed. Yeah, so you can get Warbreeds, and per my last build, because we're actually in Tome of Vigor, and if you go for Super Growth, the decreased number of units in the formation actually turns your Warbreeds into a single rank, a single like formation unit. So it's actually immune to all casualties. And obviously for that one, you would not be taking bats. You would be taking athletics, right? And then now you have 40 movement speed Warbreeds with 1 unit in the stack. And then next, you can take you take Crimson Rain, right? Because we'd have 2/4, and then instead of all the really good spells we get from the undead, you would then take Calamity, because Calamity gives you Cursed Armors, which is +2 defense, but also has, when you get hit, there's a chance of being inflicted with Ghostfire and Misfortune, and if they're attacking your, this does affect your animals too, but if they attack your racial units, then they have the blood marks. Where are they? Here we are. The flesh card runes. So they would ignore the status resistance on them, so I have a higher chance of applying Ghostfire and Misfortune. And Misfortune is quite good. And then you could, if you wanted to, summon one of the Calamity Dragons, just so it can use its like Calamity spell on the battlefield. Then you'd only ever have one in a triple stack. But it's a decent unit. And then you can still, because you take Fabled Hunters and that, you still get up to 8 Nature Affinity and you can go Goddess. I think this is worse, but if you wanted to play more like chaos focused route, as opposed to like the new undead stuff, you could play that as well. That was just like another thing I was like tinkering around with. But yeah, so I hope you enjoyed. I hope you have fun. It took me a while to sort of figure out how to best use the vampires. I know it's been a while since my last video, but yeah, have a good day.